Hi people, and I'm back cooking again. Today we'll be cooking an API style guide. This is my second video in the API series, so if you missed the first one, go and watch it. It's going to give you good context. But if you just want to know how and why to create an API style guide, then yeah, stick around and watch this one. This video is going to be a bit more technical, and it's going to be for developers, architects, tech writers, and PMs who, well, do more than just move Jira tickets. So if you're one of those things, or you're just interested in expanding your skill set, this is for you. I'll go over the logic behind creating an API style guide, which areas you should focus, which areas I'm focusing on, what's my methodology, give you some tips, and then while using my white label API style guide, which it's on my GitHub, you can use it, I'm going to create an example one for an imaginary product, just so you see actually how I would go about creating one again. One thing I would like to point out before we go to the rest of the video is that there are tools out there for you to do it, but like every great idea, we start with a pen and paper or a whiteboard, because it's important to understand why you're doing it, how you're doing it, and actually have a clear plan in your head. But the tool I used was a Spectral from Stoplight.io, and you can do a lot of interesting things with it. So a lot of you might be familiar with visual design style guides, and this is similar. It's a design document that sets expectations, standards, and processes for people creating or using your APIs. It is important to remember that you're creating an API product, not a case study for best practices, and make sure that you remember that you're building with people for people. Being consistent is more important than over-optimizing an API. So keep your people, your budgets, and your timelines in mind, and be realistic. Developers are very opinionated. Not everyone will agree with whatever you produce. Listen to feedback, but ultimately just pick whatever is the best for the product and stick with it. Don't just create a document that says our routes look like this and our responses are JSON and call it a day. One of the first things you need to establish is what the API is doing, for who and how. What are the primary use cases given a specific user? Are you serving marketing content? Are you serving videos? Are you providing an API product to be used within a CI/CD pipeline? It's something only you can answer, and it's something you should answer before writing anything more. Once you have realized the purpose of your API, you can start making decisions based off of that. My style guide is actually broken down into 7 sections: design, security, developer experience, authentication, type-specific standards, documentation, and a strategy playbook. Alright, let's start going through the categories together. We're starting off with the most important one, in my opinion, the design. This is the section where you're going to be including all your design philosophy behind the API, and it would be really good to recap your mission statement here. So we're creating an API that does this for this kind of person to be used in this system. Another thing you really need to make clear at the very start is who this is applying to. For example, is this only for REST APIs? Is this for your gRPC? Is this for your GraphQL? Are you doing SOAP? And this is where you can also limit what APIs your organization produces. For example, you can say, we're the best API for e-commerce, and we're only providing REST APIs. That's it. This might sound stupid because obviously the whole internet is in US English, but that's not even remotely true. And also German companies creating APIs in English, you might have Swiss companies having to create APIs in 5 different languages. So just keep in mind how you want your API to be accessible and which language it should be in. You should also talk about the path structure, the naming conventions, how errors are presented to the user, how requests and responses look and feel, decide on a pagination type, and document some key behaviors. The main point you're trying to convey under this design section is, this is how our API looks, feels, and operates. If you are a user of our API, expect to find these traits. If you are developing for our API, you need to follow these guides. We're going to be playing some Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance. Jokes aside, here on my GitHub I have my white label API style guide. I seriously hope all of you know how to clone stuff. So the intention behind this is to actually render it in some other type of software. This is literally just the content, and it's in Markdown, so you can just, if you want to be a Word doc, make it a Word doc. Who cares? So for the index, I chose to focus on the vision, the principles, the philosophy, and the reality. You don't even need an index file. This is just a preface I added, so we can just jump into the design. So as you can see here, there's a lot of text that may or may not apply. So in my case, it's the API style guide for an e-commerce product for a small team. So we probably don't need all of that. There must be no difference on the design conventions between internal and external APIs. Yep, we're keeping that. Use a RESTful API style guide for HTTP APIs. Well, we don't need this. We have a small team. We're just creating household REST APIs. All aspects of our APIs must be in US English. Unless there's an explicit product or legal requirement, yeah, that's fine. So the next point is an API should be more than a JSON HTTP representation of the database. This is for user experience reasons really, and also not to expose our database needlessly. Use intelligent defaults when creating a new resource. Consider if there's business logic that would be best executed in the API layer. So if someone, let's say, creates a new order, don't make them fill everything. Some of the things could be calculated based on other things. Your API resources should be nouns, not verbs. Yep, my modeling thinks the behaviors the API is more flexible. You can read the rest yourself too. In my case, I think that's fine. Property names and resources name must be meaningful and human readable. Yep, we're building for humans. You must not use a property name that's used elsewhere in the API unless the two properties are describing the exact same thing. Use camel case, snake case, kebab case as the standard. It's honestly up to you. Pick one. I'm going to go with kebab case in this one. Our recommended path template is the following: URL, resource name. Okay, let's change that. Avoid deeply nested resources such as project ID, foo ID, bar ID, content ID. Yeah, all resources should be restricted to levels deep. Again, you don't really have to give a justification, especially if it's a smaller team. It's there if you need it. Sub-resource should only be added in case where a sub-resource would not exist without the main resource. For example, a blog post can contain ads, but ads can be created in months regardless if they are part of a blog post. For example, an order line item cannot exist without an order, so you can grab an order and then grab the line items. It makes no sense to grab a line item without having the order context. Avoid metadata in the resource URL. Yep, this next one is important. Do not use query strings to introduce functionality. I've seen that a lot of times, pisses me off. That's terrible design. Pagination, all routes returning collection of items need to be paginated. Yeah, all routes returning collection of items must implement in cursor-based pagination. You don't have to. It's still probably the best option, but if you don't want to, you don't have to. Example response of a paginated resource collection. We'll need this in the standards, but since it's just an example service, I have no idea how it looks like. Routes returning a collection of items need to have a default filter set for the maximum amount of items per page. They should be modifiable by the user in most cases up to the maximum number of records set by us. Yep, if you really want to read why you shouldn't be using verbs, it's here. In this case, I'm just going to delete the whole section. And then the overall point, for any points not explicitly covered in this guide or design philosophy, the Open API standards can be utilized. So just put a fallback if anyone has any questions. So the next section is going to be another important one, security. Make sure you highlight whatever security practices you have. Your API style guide should be reinforcing them and reminding users they need to be followed. If you have a DevSecOps team, great. If you don't have one, find a standard. The OWASP API standards are a good starting point. And on top of those, you can add some other things like no security through obscurity is a favorite one of mine, and also you can also talk about how you're handling sensitive information in error logs, error messages, logs in general, and so on. The next section covers anything under developer experience. While DevX is actually a big part of your design, I put this in a separate category to cover anything that you do to make your API less misanthropic. Instead of cluttering the design section, I separate key elements and elaborate further on them. You cannot easily translate the section into some tooling configuration, so it's an excellent way to engage with your developers. These are lines I included by default in the white label guide because you want people to get meaningful responses, and you also want people to be able to navigate your API as if they were navigating your front end. So always have some response they can use to do something else if they need to. Make sure that makes sense. And you can cover things like, are we supporting events? Are we supporting webhooks? Should your API have a retry mechanism? How do we communicate this? How do we help users deal with errors in our API? I think it makes a lot of sense to have this as a separate section as well. Authentication, make sure you're clear what authentication types you're supporting, how users should be authenticating with your API. And this is one of those sections that there's definitely no right or wrong answer. It's just how you work, how your product works. Type-specific standards is also very self-explanatory. Your types should be consistent. In the example of, let's say, a blog post, you should describe what the blog post is and what the blog post means throughout your application. In a similar sense, timestamp should be following this format, or for example that we're using GUIDs and they're all alphanumeric. You get the drift. The next section has been a bit more controversial than expected, and it's documentation. It's something that confused me, because when you have development standards and ways to work as developers, you usually say, oh, you should add comments or not add comments, or this should be in the pull request. But when it comes to the API, people were surprised to find documentation standards for the API. Set expectations as you would with the actual code. One of the things that I keep highlighting to developers is when you produce anything, at the bare minimum, people should tell you how to authenticate for something and a happy path. This section also you can cross-link to other things and like documentation guides, what sort of documentation we're looking for, ways developers can contribute to it. Because there's no separation between public and private APIs, you're also setting the standards about the documentation your developers are producing for your other developers to use the APIs. So this is quite important, and this is not something we do as something nice for a customer. Obviously, I don't expect everyone to be following everything in there, but again, it's educational, so it needs to have more than a team might reasonably use. So the next section is quickly what types of documentation we're supporting. Authentication, we definitely need them. Quick start, we definitely need it. Tutorials, not for now. How-to guides, no. API reference. So obviously this is not the ideal user experience, but for a small team, for a new product, I believe that should be enough. How to authenticate, how to start using it, and here's the reference. And the minimum documentation required, you set whatever the developer should always need to give you. So in this case, it's like the OpenAPI reference and authentication instructions, and further reading, whatever. The last section, I call the strategy playbook, and that can be a whole other document by itself, but at least you can add a section where you link to different documents. So the purpose of this is that often, the more you work on a product, you find that there's things that have to happen often enough that you tend to do differently or fall between the cracks, or you solve the problem that was kind of difficult. So this is where you come in and document this. Let's say, if you need to launch a new API version, these are the steps you need to follow to launch a new one. And that can be that you have to add a deprecation notice, it has to be released with a new product version, it has to come with a marketing announcement, notify these people, follow this checklist. So every time you already know what steps need to be followed to successfully do something. So instead of having a strategy playbook section, which I do not, because yeah, I cannot make strategies up for your organization, I have some other things that actually play into it. For example, abuse prevention. Essentially, everything has to have a limit. It's a good place to actually set your limits, your casting strategies, and well, API gateway, in this case, I don't think our small team is going to have one, so we're going to remove it. Another one is the deprecation strategy. Again, as it says, this is only something that a specific product can decide. I just have some points to consider. I'm going to keep it with just a point, so if we ever have to deprecate an API, we can come here and do it. Errors is another good section. You can extract it from the design. This is a very basic version that appropriate HTTP code should be used, so not everything is a 200 error. If you're doing it, I hate you. Provide a human readable error in the response, so don't just have whatever your internal code is, actually tell the user what's going on. Treat catch-all error responses as the exception of the normal, so have specific errors. If something big happens, actually notify people because it's an error we didn't expect. And if any 500 errors happen, they need to be treated as severe bugs. I strongly stand by all these points, so I'm just going to keep them, even for a small team. And finally, versioning. All API version numbers do not have to match the product versions. Yeah. A user can select a specific version with a variable on the path of the endpoint. Yeah, makes sense. Supporting multiple versions. If a user does not specify a version, return the latest version of the API. And that's it. All design documents are really difficult to write at the best of times, especially when it's something technically complex as well. And you don't have to get it right from the beginning. Make it open to iterations. Focus on what key elements you need from there. For example, could you live if you had different types of pagination? Fine. Could you live if everyone was using different IDs? Not so fine. And I'm going to keep hammering on the point that once you make an API public, that's it. it's much more difficult to change it. So it's better to spend more time on designing it and thinking about how you build it than just launching it and then dealing with the consequences. In the near future, my plan is to actually go through APIs and review them and to show you what's my process. So if you have an API you'd like me to review, leave a link in the comments or something like that. In the meantime, please keep watching my videos. Make sure to like, subscribe if you thought it was helpful. Comments are always welcome, especially if you disagree with me. I'd like to hear what you do better. Let me know if you use a style guide in your company. And yeah, thanks for watching. I hope this was interesting. Until next time, have a good one.